Sometimes when we're on this healing journey, we often begin at the surface level. For example, maybe we find ourselves being attracted to emotionally unavailable people. And we realize, I just don't want to get hurt. I don't want to make a commitment. I'm just not ready. But if we went a little bit deeper, we realized there was some sort of abandonment wound, maybe in childhood, which is the reason why we continue to attract emotionally unavailable people. So part of this journey, and you've heard me say this over and over again, is that we got to go deep. And often the resistance is not at the surface level, it's below the surface. And what I want to address today is, how does our shadow selves get in the way, and how can we use the shadow self to overcome the resistance in our lives? I had a client ask me, what is shadow work? And so this is the inspiration for the video. Let's get started. Welcome back to Define Resistance. My name is Francis. This is where we explore ways to overcome the resistance in our lives to unlock our fullest potential, because I believe once we're able to do this, life just flows with more joy, peace, balance, and alignment. So in today's video, we're going to dive deep into the concept of the shadow self and how it can help us break through the resistance. So really quickly, what is the shadow self? The shadow self is a concept in psychology that refers to the parts of ourselves that we keep hidden or repressed, usually because they are considered socially unacceptable or undesirable. So these repressed parts of our psyche often include our deepest fears, insecurities, and negative emotions. See why I say we got to go deep? Because that stuff is so deep inside of our psyches. So an example of the shadow self can include things like jealousy, anger, resentment, greed, shame, and fear. One of the things that me and my client were talking about was selfishness. So these are all natural and normal human emotions, but they are often seen as negative or undesirable. So we try to just suppress them or ignore them, pretend that they don't exist. However, when we suppress these emotions, they can often manifest in unhealthy ways, such as passive-aggressive behaviors. I know some of y'all might be familiar with that. That was me, passive-aggressive, recovering passive-aggressive behavior person. It comes in ways like self-sabotage or even like physical symptoms like stress or illness. So emotions that are trapped inside of us become dis-ease in our bodies. So Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology. So he was known for his contributions to the field of psychology, including his theories on the shadow self. So he's the reason why we have this thing here. And according to Jung, the shadow self is the part of the unconscious that is repressed or hidden from the conscious awareness. This is why we have to go deep. It's made up of all the aspects of ourselves that we deny, ignore, including our weaknesses, our faults, and our flaws. So Jung said that the shadow self represents aspects of ourselves that we reject. Jung believed that the shadow self could cause us to project our qualities onto other people, which can lead to conflicts and problems in our relationships. He also argued that the shadow self can contribute to feelings of guilt, shame, and self-doubt, and can often prevent us from realizing our full potential. So this resistance that we're talking about goes way deeper than I just don't feel like doing this thing today. He believes by us exploring our shadow self, we can learn to recognize and integrate these repressed aspects of ourselves, which can lead to greater self-awareness, tremendous emotional healing, and of course, personal growth. But this process requires a willingness to confront and accept these parts of ourselves without judgment, and to use that knowledge to become more whole and authentic. So I believe we have a bit of idea of how not acknowledging our shadow selves can contribute to the resistance, but let's go a little bit further into this. The shadow self can contribute to resistance by holding us back and keeping us stuck in patterns of behaviors that no longer serve us. When we ignore or deny parts of ourselves that we perceive as negative or unacceptable, those qualities become part of our shadow self. So they don't just go away just because we don't acknowledge them, right? They're still a part of us. They're still there. In fact, they're probably tugging at us to get our attention. And these feelings can include, just like I mentioned earlier, fear, anger, jealousy, greed, shame, and so much more. And so because we've disowned these traits, we said, you know what? I'm not taking responsibility for this. And often people say, that's so out of character of me to do something like this. That's not who I am. And I'll challenge that and say, it is who you are. It's a part of who you are. And without shame or judgment, but know that is a piece of you that needs some sort of acknowledgement so that you could heal that part of yourself. And so again, because we have disowned these traits, we may find ourselves resisting situations or experiences that triggers them. What do I mean by this? If we have a fear of abandonment in our shadow self. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. We may resist forming close relationships or avoid taking risks that could lead to rejection. This resistance, as we already know, can manifest as procrastination, self-sabotage, which I'm doing a whole video about self-sabotage soon, and other forms of avoidance. The shadow self can also contribute to resistance by creating a sense of inner conflict. When we deny parts of ourselves, we create an internal division between what we believe is acceptable and what we see as unacceptable. So we have the perceived self, and then we have the actual self, right? The one that is hiding behind all those masks. So this inner conflict can create lots of confusion and indecision. This is why you might find yourself having lack of clarity, making it difficult to move forward and take action because you have these oppositional forces working against you. So to overcome resistance, it's important to acknowledge and integrate the shadow self. By bringing our unconscious patterns and behaviors into conscious awareness, we can begin to understand the ways in which they're holding us back. I always say we can only achieve wholeness. When our conscious selves and our unconscious selves become one. And so this process of self-discovery and self-acceptance, it can be very challenging, but it's essential for breaking through resistance and creating positive change in our lives. So it sounds like, oh my God, like I have to do so much work to do this. It's not that you have a lot of work to do. When we think that way, we think that this is a sprint. Life is not a sprint. It's a marathon. And we also have to understand that there are multiple people who have been born into this world with a set of circumstances. So we're all sort of navigating this whole world together in different ways. And everyone has a specific blueprint that they must overcome to achieve their highest potential, to shed, to evolve. Because that's what our souls are here to do. Our souls are here to evolve. And once you figure out the thing, I always talk about the domino effect. And the domino effect has to do with what is the one thing, if I decide to focus on this specific area, that as a result, all the dominoes will fall. And the reason why you might find yourself spinning your wheels is because you haven't figured out that one thing. And so it feels like a lot of heavy lifting. But if you can get to that one source, everything else will fall into place. By now, we've realized how important it is to explore and integrate the shadow self. But let's talk a little bit more about how it can lead to growth and transformation. Jung really encouraged individuals to explore and integrate their shadow selves as part of the process of individuation, which is really just the journey of self-discovery, wholeness, and self-realization. Essentially, when you're a child, you are connected to your caregivers, and then at some point you separate from them to form your own identity. That's what individuation is. It usually starts happening, young kids try to do things on their own. They try to be autonomous. And then you can really see it in adolescence. And at some point, we just need to go through that process of individuation, which means deprogramming all of those narratives that was given to you throughout your childhood, maybe your adulthood. And it's through that deprogramming that we can really begin the steps to heal. But we got to deprogram those narratives first. And so part of what's going to be helpful is knowing what stage you're in throughout this process. I had talked a little bit about what needs to happen in these various stages of our lives in a video called Stuck at a Crossroad. And I'll leave it at the end of this video so that you can check it out. I realized once we understand where we are on the stage of this journey, we have more self-compassion and more grace, and we can move forward without putting too much pressure on ourselves. And so through this process of acknowledging and accepting our shadow selves, we can learn to understand ourselves better, heal our emotional wounds, and become more authentic and empowered. Jung believed that the process of integrating the shadow self involved bringing our unconscious thoughts and feelings into conscious awareness, just like I said earlier with my quote. So exploring and integrating the shadow self is really the essence of personal growth and transformation. When we deny or repress parts of ourselves, they continue to operate unconsciously, as I mentioned earlier, often manifesting as self-sabotage, those limiting beliefs that you might be struggling with, and also destructive behaviors, making decisions that really go against your original self, and it's causing so much chaos. But once we acknowledge this part of ourselves, we can begin to understand the motivations behind it, the fears that drive our actions, and make conscious choices to truly align ourselves with our true values and also just our true selves, our true essences. And the more we get to know this part of ourselves, it really does something beautiful. It can lead to an increased self-compassion and empathy towards others. When we recognize and accept our own imperfections and vulnerabilities, we are more likely to extend that same compassion to those around us. And this can lead to deeper, more meaningful relationships and a greater sense of connection to ourselves and the rest of the world. And this is when we realize that we're really, truly interconnected. One of the things I recently said is we can either help each other remember or we can help each other forget. So connecting to this part of ourselves really ultimately gives us an opportunity to live a more fulfilling and authentic life. So let's get down to some practical steps that you can actually take, that you can practice on your own to get started. So exploring the shadow self can be very intense, okay? I often recommend that you do it with somebody, a professional, whether that's a therapist or a coach, but you can get started on your own a little bit. But do know that this is an intense process and it is very uncomfortable. But, discomfort is the price you pay for a meaningful life, as Susan David said. But by doing this, it's incredibly transformative. There's a book that I always recommend for this type of work if you're going to tackle it solo. I'll leave it at the end of the video. But if you want to cheat, it's in the description below, so go ahead and click that. You can go ahead and purchase it. All right, so let's get started with the techniques. The first thing, I'm sure you've heard already, and I'll just keep saying it because this stuff works. It might seem a bit rudimentary, but it works. Journaling, writing down your thoughts and feelings without judgment, allowing yourself to explore the parts of yourself that you may have suppressed or ignored. This can help you identify the patterns or behaviors that are holding you back. You're almost trying to build or rebuild a relationship with yourself. I often hear folks tell me, I am so disconnected with myself. Sometimes when you start journaling, you start just like saying some really just sometimes negative and not so good things about yourself. And that's okay if it starts off that way. And eventually what you can do is maybe a month or 2 months from there, look back and read it and be like, whoa, is this really how I feel? Is this really how I think of myself? And then you could trace the source of why you feel that way about yourself. Why do you think of yourself that way? I always say that everything goes back to childhood. When we do that inner child work, we can begin to rebuild that relationship, begin to reparent ourselves. The next practice that you can take is meditation. And we don't have to think of it as like, oh, I got to sit and meditate for an hour. It's just about being mindful. It's really just about taking time with yourself, sitting in silence, observing your emotions and your thoughts without trying to make sense of anything at all. It's about allowing things to come to the surface. And when uncomfortable thoughts or feelings arise, don't push them away. Don't ignore them. Instead, allow them to be present and observe them without judgment, because meditation is all about allowing things to rise and pass. Rise and pass. Allow yourself to sit as long as you can in that discomfort. Shadow work is intense, and the things that might come to the surface might feel a bit overwhelming. So I always recommend seek a therapist that might have a specialty in a specific area, or find yourself a coach or anyone who can sort of support you through this process. Because what's important about this is that they'll help you to be able to process and even provide you with other ways that you can manage the uncomfortable feelings that might be coming up for you. Something else that doesn't get a lot of attention is creative expression. Sometimes it's important to explore your shadow self through creative expression, because sometimes the words are hard to articulate. So maybe use creative expression such as painting, writing, like I said, journaling earlier, music, even dance. Using creative expression will allow yourself to express your emotions and feelings in a way that's most authentic to you. Sometimes we just need to release some of the energy that is being held within our bodies. A shadow work exercise I'm going to recommend that you try. Again, be curious and open. This is all about experimenting and finding what works for you, what resonates for you, because what resonates for one person is not going to resonate for another person. So there's a technique called the mirror, or even the empty chair. But the mirror is when you just sort of sit in front of the mirror and observe your reflection while you explore your emotions and your thoughts. You want to see how your body reacts to some of this stuff. And the mirror reflection allows you to really look at yourself for who you truly are with all the imperfections and still find some sort of compassion and love for yourself. The empty chair is really just having a conversation, maybe with a specific caregiver that hurt you, putting them in the empty chair and having the conversation that you wish you had. Sometimes it could be with your younger self, but any person or even situation that you can put there that you can have this conversation. Remember that exploring the shadow self is not something that is one and done. You do it once and you're done. This is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing relationship and it takes time. It requires a lot of patience, obviously self-compassion, lots of love and grace, and a willingness to face uncomfortable emotions. But the rewards of greater self-awareness and personal growth make it such a worthwhile journey, which leads me to talk a little bit more about the benefits of doing this kind of work. It could lead to so many breakthroughs. It can disrupt the patterns that keep showing up in your life over and over again if you're open to do this type of work. Integrating the shadow self and doing more shadow work leads us to a greater sense of self-awareness and wholeness. We become more aware of ourselves. We become more aware of what triggers us. I don't like that word, but what sort of creates the reaction within us so that we can properly respond in ways that are healthy and we become less reactive. This is something that I dealt with for a long time, just the emotional reactivity. But doing shadow work allows us to become less reactive, less defensive, and more accepting of our imperfections and, of course, of the imperfections of those around us. When we integrate the shadow self, it can lead to so many breakthroughs in our personal and spiritual growth. Even the things that we want to create, we can now create because we've made space for this part of our lives. When we confront our fears and limiting beliefs, we're able to move past them and take action towards the things that we want to come true in our lives, the desired life. We become more authentic and true to ourselves, and we can create deeper and more meaningful relationships with other people. So yes, this kind of work requires courage, I'm gonna say it again, self-compassion, and willingness to explore the unknown parts of ourselves. But the rewards of greater self-awareness, compassion, and breakthroughs are well worth all the effort that it takes. Exploring the shadow self is a powerful tool for overcoming the resistance and unlocking your true potential. By embracing your fears and embracing the parts of yourself that you have been pushing aside, you can begin to move forward with greater clarity, purpose, self-acceptance, and self-compassion. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. And of course, share this with somebody that you love, and continue to come back here for more stuff to help you move past the resistance in your life. And of course, I'll see you on the other side of wholeness.